She drifted off in the Skyport terminal, seated beside a stranger in an impeccably tailored suit that would definitely cost more than her annual income, too drained to care, too desperate to escape. He observed her through the night, a lone mother coiled protectively around her daughter. What she didn't know was that the serene businessman by her side was a high-ranking syndicate leader. And the moment her child's innocent giggle reached him, everything shifted. The announcement crackled through Gate 34 like a decree of doom. Flight 712 to Emerald City has been cancelled due to unforeseen operational issues. All passengers, please proceed to the customer assistance desk for alternative arrangements. Lara Vance's hands trembled as she clutched her 6-year-old daughter closer. Mia was already asleep against her shoulder, her small fingers still sticky from the juice box Lara had bought her 3 gates ago, back when she still believed they'd make it out tonight. No, 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 she whispered, her voice cracking. She couldn't afford to stay. Not here. Not anywhere near Metropolis. She stumbled toward the customer assistance desk, where a line of agitated travelers already snaked back toward the bustling food court. A man in a crisp uniform was loudly protesting about a critical presentation in Olympus. A young woman quietly wept into her scarf. Lara joined the back of the line, adjusting Mia's weight on her hip, and felt the familiar sting of tears behind her eyes. She couldn't cry. Not now. Not in front of all these people. The terminal lights hummed overhead, stark and unyielding. Through the massive windows, a relentless downpour lashed against the tarmac. Lightning tore across the sky. The storm felt apocalyptic, as if the heavens themselves had decided Lara Vance didn't deserve a reprieve. 3 hours later, she had her answer. No flights until dawn. Perhaps not even then. Ma'am, I can put you on standby for the 5:30 a.m., the gate agent droned, not even glancing up from her screen. But I'll be honest, with these conditions, I'd say your chances are 50-50. 50-50. Alara's entire existence had become a coin toss. She carried Mia back through the terminal, past the shuttered kiosks and dimmed eateries. The airport had transformed into a strange limbo, full of stranded souls curled up on plastic chairs, using scarves as blankets, checking their phones every 30 seconds, as if the weather might change through sheer force of will. Lara found a relatively quiet nook near Gate 61, away from the chatter of families and the oppressive glare. She spread her thin shawl on the floor. The seats had armrests that made lying down impossible and gently settled Mia down. Her daughter didn't even stir. The girl could sleep through anything now. She'd acquired that skill over the past 6 months when Mommy started packing bags in the dead of night. Lara lay down beside her, curving her body around Mia's like a shield. The floor was cold and hard, but at least it was flat. At least they were together. At least. That's when she noticed him. The man sat a few feet away, his back against the wall between 2 gates, long legs stretched out in front of him. He wore a midnight blue suit that likely cost more than Lara's entire wardrobe. And even at a desolate 3:15 a.m., he looked utterly composed. Not a wrinkle, not a strand of hair out of place. But it was his eyes that ensnared her. He was watching them, not staring precisely, but observing with the kind of intensity that made Lara's survival instincts ignite. His gaze was dark, perceptive, and unsettlingly calm, like a man who had witnessed everything the world had to offer and found most of it wanting. Lara's hand instinctively moved to Mia's back. She'd learned to read dangerous men. Her ex-partner had taught her that lesson with his sharp words and colder silences. But this man didn't look angry. He didn't look predatory or aggressive or any of the things she'd learned to dread. He looked simply tired, in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. Their eyes met. Lara felt her breath catch. She should look away. She should gather Mia and move to a different gate. Find somewhere else to sleep where strangers didn't watch her with eyes that seemed to see straight through to all her desperate, fleeing secrets. But she was so tired. Tired of running. Tired of being afraid. Tired of making decisions that all led to sleeping on airport floors. So instead, she did something reckless. She held his gaze. For 3 heartbeats, they stared at each other across the gate area. The man's expression shifted just slightly. Something flickered behind those dark eyes, surprise, perhaps, or a flicker of recognition. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, keeping his movements visible, and pulled out a small blanket. The kind airlines distributed in premier class, still wrapped in plastic. He stood up in one fluid motion, crossed the distance between them, and held it out to her. "For the child," he said. His voice was low, a little gravelly, with the faintest trace of a coastal accent. "Star City, perhaps. It gets chilly at night." 𝙎𝙬 stared at the blanket, at his outstretched hand, at the intricate watch on his wrist, and the faint scar that bisected his left eyebrow. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to say, "No, thank you," and turn away and protect Mia from whatever this strange man might want in return. But Mia was shivering. 𝙎𝙬 could feel it against her chest, small tremors running through her thin frame. "Thank you," she whispered, taking the blanket. Their fingers brushed for just a second. His were warm and steady. Then he stepped back. He returned to his spot against the wall and settled back down as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just shown more kindness than any stranger had in months. 𝙎𝙬 draped the blanket over Mia, tucking it around her shoulders. Her daughter sighed in her sleep and burrowed deeper against her. 𝙎𝙬 looked back at the man. He wasn't watching anymore. His eyes were closed, his head tilted back against the wall, hands folded across his stomach. He looked like any other stranded traveler trying to catch a few hours of rest. But 𝙎𝙬 knew better. She'd seen the way he moved, graceful and controlled, like a hunter. She'd seen the calculation in his eyes, the weight of authority in the set of his shoulders. This was not an ordinary man sleeping in an airport. And yet, he'd given her daughter a blanket. 𝙎𝙬 pulled Mia closer and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, they'd get on that plane. Tomorrow, they'd disappear into Emerald City, into new identities and new lives, away from her ex-partner and his connections and his veiled threats that next time he wouldn't stop at just words. Tomorrow, she'd be safe. But tonight, in this strange, in-between space where the rules of the normal world didn't quite apply, she let herself feel something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite safe, but maybe for just a moment, not entirely alone. A few feet away, the man opened his eyes. Julian D'Angelo watched 𝙎𝙬 Vance fall into an uneasy sleep, her body still curved protectively around her child, and felt something stir in his chest, something he thought had died 3 years ago when they'd laid his sister, Isabella, to rest. He'd come to Metropolis to end a silent war, to sit across from the Valerius family and broker a truce before his city drowned in shadows. He hadn't expected to find something worth safeguarding instead. Morning arrived with the kind of pale, hesitant light that follows storms. 𝙎𝙬 woke to Mia tugging at her sleeve, her whisper urgent in her ear. "Mama, I need the washroom." She blinked away the fog of too little sleep and sat up, her back protesting fiercely. The airport was already stirring to life. Gate agents arriving for early shifts, cleaners pushing industrial carts, the coffee shops raising their metal shutters with a clatter that echoed through the terminal. The man was still there. He sat in the same position, though now he was awake, checking his comm device with the focused attention of someone reading something of immense importance. In the harsh morning light, 𝙎𝙬 could see him more clearly, mid-30s, perhaps early 40s, with the kind of face that was more striking than classically handsome. Sharp cheekbones, a nose that had been broken at least once, and that scar through his eyebrow that made him look dangerous even when he was doing something as mundane as scrolling through messages. "Come on, sweetie," 𝙎𝙬 whispered to Mia, helping her to her feet. The blanket, the stranger's blanket, slipped to the floor. She picked it up, folding it carefully, and approached the man. He looked up as she came near, his dark eyes unreadable. "Thank you," 𝙎𝙬 said, holding out the blanket. "Truly, that was very thoughtful." He took it with a slight nod. "Child just needs the facilities. There's one past the stellar bucks," he gestured down the concourse. "Usually cleaner than the main ones." 𝙎𝙬 hesitated. "You've been here before?" Something flickered across his face. Amusement, perhaps. "I fly through Metropolis often." Mia tugged her hand harder. "Mama, please." "Right. Sorry. Thank you again, Mr. Julian, he said, just the first name, nothing more. Lara, she managed a small smile. And this is Mia. Julian looked at her daughter for a long moment, his expression softening in a way that seemed to surprise even him. Nice to meet you, Mia. 20 minutes later, they returned to find Julian still there, now with 2 coffee cups and a juice box. He held out the juice to Mia without a word. Oh, you don't have to, Lara started. She looks thirsty. Mia's eyes went wide. Can I, Mama? She should say no. She should maintain boundaries with strange men in airports who watched her sleep and bought her daughter drinks. But Mia's face was so hopeful, and the juice box looked so normal, so harmless, and Lara was just so tired of being the parent who always said no to everything. Okay, but what do you say? Thank you. Mia grabbed the juice box and immediately started struggling with the straw. Julian reached over and peeled the straw off the side, poking it through the foil hole with practiced ease. The gesture was so natural, so paternal, that Lara felt her throat tighten. Do you have children? She asked before she could stop herself. No, his voice went flat. Just a good memory. Lara wanted to ask more, but something in his tone told her the door had closed. Instead, she accepted the coffee he offered, black, strong, exactly what she needed. They sat in awkward silence for a moment, Mia slurping her juice between them. Then it happened. Mia squeezed the box too hard. Juice exploded from the top, spraying across Julian's sleeve, the pristine white cuff of his expensive shirt now stained bright orange. Oh my God. Lara lunged forward, grabbing napkins from her bag. Mia, be careful. I'm so sorry. She stopped. Julian was smiling. Not a polite smile, not a forced, it's okay smile. A real smile. One that reached his eyes and carved lines into his face and made him look suddenly, startlingly human. It's just juice, he said, still smiling as he dabbed at the stain. I've had worse on the shirt. I'll pay for the cleaning, Lara insisted. Lara, he said her name like he was gentling a spooked horse. It's fine. Really. Mia's lower lip trembled. I didn't mean to. Julian looked at the child, and his expression shifted into something tender. Hey, you know what? This shirt was too boring anyway. Now it's got character. He held up his orange-stained cuff. See? One of a kind. Mia giggled. Actually giggled. And Lara felt something crack open in her chest. You're good with children, she said quietly, helping clean up the mess. I had a sister, he said, past tense. That flat tone again. She had a son about Mia's age. Had. Julian's jaw tightened. 3 years ago. Both of them. I'm so sorry. He shook his head, standing up to throw away the soaked napkins. When he came back, his expression was carefully neutral again. The wall rebuilt. What about you? Where are you headed? Lara's instinct was to lie, to say anything except the truth. But something about the way he'd shared his loss made her want to be honest. Emerald City, she said. We're starting over. Running from something. Her heart stopped. What makes you say that? Julian's eyes met hers. And Lara saw the intelligence there, the sharp assessment of a man who read people the way she used to read bedtime stories to Mia. Because I know what running looks like, he said softly. And you've got the eyes of someone who's been looking over her shoulder for too long. Lara's throat went dry. My ex-partner. He's not a good man. We need to disappear. Julian's entire demeanor changed. His shoulders tensed. His hands curled into fists before he deliberately relaxed them. When he spoke, his voice was cold enough to frost glass. Did he hurt you? It wasn't really a question. Lara pulled her collar up unconsciously, covering the faded bruise on her collarbone. We're leaving. That's what matters. Lara, we should go check the standby list. She stood up quickly, pulling Mia with her. Thank you for the coffee and the juice and everything. Julian stood too, and suddenly he was in her space, not threatening, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody. Wait. He reached into his jacket and pulled out 2 boarding passes. First class, Emerald City, departing in 40 minutes. What are you? Take them, he said, pressing the passes into her hand. I'm done traveling anyway. I can't accept. Yes, you can. His eyes locked onto hers, intense and urgent. Get on that plane. Get somewhere safe. And Alara. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. If your ex comes looking, make sure you stay disappeared. Men like that don't stop. They only get worse. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the morning crowd. Alara stood frozen, holding 2 first-class tickets to freedom, while Mia tugged at her hand and asked why the nice man had left so quickly. She didn't have an answer. She didn't know that Julian had just received a text from his lieutenant. Valeria's family tracked you to Skyport. They're watching the gates. She didn't know that her ex-partner, Gideon Vance, had once done security work for the Valeria syndicate. She didn't know that by sleeping next to Julian D'Angelo for 6 hours, she'd accidentally wandered into the middle of a syndicate conflict. But she would. Alara stood at gate 61, clutching the boarding passes like they might evaporate. First class, 2 seats, her name and Mia's. Somehow Julian had known their full names, though she'd never told him Mia's last name. That should have terrified her. Instead, she felt only a strange numbness as she watched the gate agent scan the passes. The woman smiled, actually smiled, and said, "Welcome aboard, Miss Vance. You and your daughter can board anytime." Mia bounced on her toes. "Mama, we get to go first." "Yeah, sweetie, we do." They walked down the jet bridge, and Alara couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her back. She turned once, scanning the crowd at the gate, but saw only tired travelers and business people checking their comm devices. No Julian. He'd vanished as suddenly as he'd appeared, leaving behind only his tickets and that warning, men like that don't stop. They only get worse. The first-class cabin was a revelation. Wide leather seats, warm towels offered by a smiling flight attendant. Mia pressed her face against the window, watching the ground crew load luggage below. "Mama, this is like a flying castle." Alara managed to smile, buckling her in. "It is, isn't it?" As the plane filled, she kept expecting someone to tell her there had been a mistake, that these seats belonged to someone else, that women like her, broke, running, desperate, didn't get first-class tickets to anywhere. But no one came. The plane pushed back from the gate exactly on time. Through the window, Alara watched Skyport International grow smaller, and with it, everything she was running from: Gideon and his words, Metropolis and its memories, the apartment where she'd learned to flinch at footsteps. "We're flying, Mama." Mia pressed against the window as the wheels left the ground. "We are," Alara whispered. "We really are." She didn't see Julian standing at the terminal window 3 gates down, watching her plane climb into the cloudy sky. Didn't see the way his jaw tightened, or how his hand moved unconsciously to his chest, pressing against his heart like he was trying to hold something in. She didn't see the 3 men in dark suits approaching him from behind. "Boss," the voice was quiet, respectful. "We have a problem." Julian didn't turn from the window. "What kind of problem, Victor?" His lieutenant stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. "Valerius's people, they've been tracking you through airport security feeds. They know you were here." "How many?" "At least 6 that we've spotted. They're watching all the exits." Julian finally turned, his expression carefully blank. "Did they see the woman?" Victor hesitated. "We're not sure, but boss, why does it matter? She's just some random." "Did they see her?" Each word was precise. "Dangerous." "Possibly. You were sitting together for hours. If they were monitoring you, they might have footage." Julian's hands curled into fists. He'd been careless, sloppy. He'd let his guard down because of a giggling child and a woman with terrified eyes. And now her flight just took off. Emerald City should land in about 3 hours. Good. Julian straightened his cuffs, covering the juice stain that had somehow made him smile for the first time in 3 years. "Get me everything on her, full background. And I want to know who she's running from." "Boss, I don't understand." "You don't need to." Julian's voice went cold. "Just do it." Victor nodded and pulled out his comm device, already making calls. The other 2 men flanked Julian as they moved through the terminal, not obviously protective, but positioned to intercept any threat. Julian walked with the casual confidence of a man who owned every space he entered. To anyone watching, he looked like just another business traveler heading home after a delayed flight. But the 𝙎𝙎 family knew better. They'd called this meeting to negotiate territory, to end the quiet war that had been simmering between Star City's factions for the past year. Julian had come because he was tired of bloodshed, tired of funerals, tired of becoming the monster everyone expected him to be. He'd come to make peace. Instead, he'd found something more dangerous. Someone he wanted to protect. His comm device buzzed. A text from his cousin, Arthur, back in Star City. Meeting's off. 𝙎𝙎 pulled out. Says you disrespected him by wandering around like a tourist instead of staying put. They're calling it an insult. Julian typed back when? 20 minutes ago. They're pissed, Julian. Real pissed. Watch your back. Victor appeared at his elbow. Cars waiting at arrivals. Different route than planned. Smart. They moved through the terminal, past the shops and restaurants, now fully open for morning business. A child laughed somewhere nearby, high and pure, and Julian thought of Mia's giggle when he'd called his juice-stained shirt one of a kind. His comm device buzzed again. This time it was a file from Victor, 𝙎𝙎's background check. Julian opened it as they walked, scanning the details. 𝙎𝙎Marie Vance, 28, born in Oak Haven, California. Married Gideon Vance 5 years ago. One child, Mia Vance, age 6. Filed for separation 9 months ago. 3 domestic disturbance calls to Metropolis PD. No arrests made. Current employment, unemployed. Last known address, Metropolis, Illinois. Vacated 2 weeks ago. Gideon Vance, former Metropolis PD, discharged 3 years ago, currently employed by 𝙎𝙎 Security Solutions. Julian stopped walking. Boss. Victor looked back. 𝙎𝙎 Security Solutions, the legitimate front company the 𝙎𝙎 family used for their enforcers, the place they put ex-officers and former military who didn't mind bending rules or breaking bones. 𝙎𝙎 wasn't just running from an abusive ex-partner. She was running from someone connected to the very family that wanted Julian dead. Change of plans, Julian said quietly. I need a flight to Emerald City. Private jet. Now. Boss, we need to get you back to Star City. The 𝙎𝙎 can wait. Julian's voice cut like a blade. Get me that flight, Victor, and pull everything you can find on Gideon Vance. I want to know what he does for the 𝙎𝙎, who he reports to, and where he is right now. Victor and the other men exchanged glances, but they knew better than to argue when Julian used that tone. As they headed toward the private aviation terminal, Julian looked out at the sky where Alara's plane had disappeared into the clouds. He'd given her his tickets, thinking it was a simple kindness, a way to save a woman and child who reminded him of everything he'd lost. He hadn't realized he was putting them directly in the crosshairs of a family conflict. But now that he knew, there was only one choice. The 𝙎𝙎 wanted to play games. Fine. Julian D'Angelo had been playing them longer and better than anyone alive. And he'd just found the only piece on the board that actually mattered. 𝙎𝙎 Vance had no idea she'd been running from one threat straight into the protection of another, or that the calm stranger who'd given her a blanket and a smile was about to burn down half the criminal underworld to keep her safe. Emerald City greeted 𝙎𝙎 with a kind of dry, relentless heat that felt like stepping into an oven. She held Mia's hand as they navigated Sky Harbor Airport, her eyes scanning every face, every corner, waiting for Gideon to materialize from the crowd with that false smile he used before the accusations started. But there was no one, just tourists in sun hats and business travelers dragging roller bags. Mama, I'm hot, Mia whined, tugging at her jacket. I know, sweetie. We'll get somewhere cool soon. The motel was exactly what $52 a night bought. Peeling paint, questionable stains on the carpet, and a window unit that rattled like it was dying. But it had a lock on the door and a bed that wasn't an airport floor. And right now, that felt like paradise. 𝙎𝙎 paid in cash, bills she'd been hiding from Gideon for 6 months, $25 at a time, tucked inside a cereal box because she knew he'd never look there. Room 17, the desk clerk said, handing over a physical key. Ice machine's broken. Vending machine only takes exact change. That's fine. Thank you. She got Mia settled with the tablet she'd bought at a pawn shop, loaded with downloaded cartoons that didn't need Wi-Fi. Her daughter sprawled across the bed, already absorbed in a world of talking animals and adventure, while Alara sat by the window and tried to remember how to breathe. They'd made it. They were here. Emerald City, Arizona. A city where Gideon didn't know anyone. Where she could get a job paying under the table. Where they could disappear into the sprawl of strip malls and subdivisions until they were just another single mom and her kid. Safe. She almost believed it. 3,000 miles away, in a private office above a discreet restaurant in Star City, Julian D'Angelo stood before a wall of monitors displaying information that most people would never see. Victor pointed to a screen. Gideon Vance, age 34, Metropolis PD for 7 years, discharged after an excessive force complaint, hired by 𝙎𝙄𝙉 Security Solutions 3 months later. He does collection work, mostly intimidation, asset recovery, the occasional enforcement job. Enforcement, Julian repeated flatly. Yeah. Victor pulled up another file. For suspected homicides, all ruled self-defense or accidental. The guy's connected enough that charges never stick. Julian's jaw clenched. And Alara married him 5 years ago. Probably didn't know what she was getting into. First police call came 4 years into the marriage. Neighbors reported screaming. By the time cops arrived, she'd already told them it was nothing. Said she dropped a plate, got startled. Classic, Julian muttered. It escalated from there. 2 more calls in the next year. Last one, she had a broken arm. Told the ER she fell downstairs. Victor paused. Hospital records show the break pattern was consistent with defensive injuries, like someone grabbed her and twisted. Julian turned away from the screens, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. He could see it too clearly. Alara, smaller than Gideon, trying to protect herself. Mia hiding in her room, learning to sleep through Discord. Where's Gideon now? Victor pulled up a GPS tracker. That's the interesting part. He's in Emerald City. The room went cold. Since when? Landed yesterday morning, 7 hours before Alara and the kid. Victor zoomed in on the map. He's staying at a resort hotel on the north side. We've had eyes on him since you ordered the full surveillance. So he knows where she's going. Looks like it. He probably has her comm device tracked, or he's been monitoring her purchases. She bought those plane tickets with a credit card. Stupid move, but she probably didn't know better. Julian's mind raced. Gideon was already in Emerald City, already waiting. This wasn't Alara running away successfully. This was a predator allowing the prey to think it had escaped before striking. What's Gideon's connection to the 𝙎𝙉 specifically? Julian asked. Is he just muscle, or is there more? Victor hesitated. That's where it gets complicated. We pulled his work records. Guess who his primary contact is? Tell me. Salvatore Valerius, the youngest son, the one who called the meeting in Metropolis, Julian finished. The one who wanted to negotiate. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The Valerius had tracked Julian to Skyport. They'd watched him in the airport. They'd seen him with Alara and Mia, seen him give up his first-class tickets, seen him act protective over a woman and child who should have meant nothing to him. And then they'd pulled out of the peace talks. Not because Julian had insulted them by walking around like a tourist, but because they'd found leverage. Boss, Victor said carefully. Alara Vance isn't just some woman running from her ex. She's accidentally become a target because she slept next to you in an airport. I know, Julian's voice was ice. The Valerius probably don't even know who she is yet. They just know you cared enough to give her your tickets. That's all they need. Victor pulled up security footage from Skyport. Grainy, but clear enough to show Julian smiling as he handed Mia the juice box. This is the first time in 3 years anyone's caught you showing emotion in public. The Valerius will use that. Julian stared at the screen, at his own face looking almost human again for just a moment. He'd been so careful since Isabella died. Careful not to care, not to show weakness, not to give his enemies anything they could use against him. He'd built walls so high that nothing could touch him. And then a 6-year-old spilled juice on his sleeve, and he'd smiled. Now that smile might get them killed. What do you want us to do? Victor asked. Julian pulled out his comm device, opening a secure messaging app. I want a team in Emerald City. Best we have. Arthur, Marcus, and Teresa. I want them on a 𝙎𝙎 24/7, invisible perimeter. If Gideon breathes near that motel, I want to know about it. And if the 𝙎𝙎 make a move, then we make sure they regret it. Julian looked up, his eyes flat and dangerous. But Victor, no killing. Not unless absolutely necessary. I'm done with that approach. Victor blinked. Boss, these are the 𝙎𝙎. They don't do subtle. Then we'll teach them. Julian straightened his jacket. Get me a flight to Emerald City and pull everything you can on Salvatore 𝙎𝙎's business operations. I want to know where he's vulnerable. Financial records, political connections, anything illegal that he thinks is hidden. You're going after them without violence? I'm going after them with something worse. A cold smile crossed Julian's face. Information. The 𝙎𝙎 built their empire on secrets and blackmail. Let's see how they like it when someone uses their own weapons against them. As Victor left to make arrangements, Julian looked back at the monitor showing Alara's location. The cursor blinked over a cheap motel on the outskirts of Emerald City. She thought she'd escaped. She thought she was starting fresh. She had no idea that her ex-partner was less than 10 miles away, or that a syndicate family was trying to decide whether she was worth using as bait, or that the man who'd smiled at her daughter in an airport was currently deploying a protection detail that cost more than most people made in a year. Alara Vance wanted to disappear. Instead, she'd become the center of a storm she couldn't even see coming. But Julian could, and he'd be damned if he let it touch her. Alara spent 3 days building a life from nothing. She found a job washing dishes at a diner called the Comic Cafe. No questions asked, cash paid daily. Exactly the kind of place that didn't care about background checks or references. The work was hard and hot, her hands raw from industrial soap by the end of each shift. But it was honest money, safe money. Mia started at a new elementary school under their real names because Alara didn't know how to forge documents and couldn't afford to find out. Every morning, she walked her to the bus stop 3 blocks from the motel, kissed her forehead, and watched her climb aboard with her second-hand backpack. Every morning, she waited for Gideon to appear. He never did. By the 4th day, Alara started to believe they might actually make it. She was leaving the Comet through the back door, already dark at 8 p.m., the desert air finally cooling, when she saw the envelope. It sat on the windshield of her beat-up Solaris sedan like a parking ticket, white and official-looking. Alara's heart hammered as she approached. Parking ticket she could handle. Eviction notice she could probably handle. But when she opened it, the world tilted sideways. Inside were 2 identity chips. New Republic chips, brand new, with her and Mia's photos, but different names, Celine and Eva Thorne. Beneath them, a single note in precise handwriting, start fresh. Don't look back. No signature. No explanation. Alara's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped everything. She looked around the empty parking lot, just her car and a dumpster and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. What the hell? She whispered. Someone knew where she was. Someone had access to her photos she'd only taken for the school enrollment forms 2 days ago. Someone had the power to create federal documents. And someone wanted her to run again. Alara shoved the identity chips back in the envelope and drove to the motel with her eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. Every car behind her looked suspicious. Every stranger on the sidewalk could be watching. She burst into the motel room to find Mia sitting cross-legged on the bed, carefully coloring in a picture of a nebula. The babysitter, a teenage girl from the front desk, looked up from her comm device. Everything okay, Ms. Vance? Fine. Alara forced a smile, pulling cash from her pocket. Thanks for watching her, Jasmine. After the girl left, Alara locked the door, fastened the chain, and shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. Mia looked up confused. Mama, what's wrong? Nothing, sweetie. Just being careful. She knelt beside her, smoothing her hair back. Did anyone come by? Anyone knock on the door? Just the maintenance man. But he didn't knock. He just fixed the machine outside. Alara went cold. What did he look like? I don't know. I only saw through the window. He had a blue shirt. She moved to the window, peeking through the curtains. The parking lot looked normal. The ice machine sat silent in its alcove, a handwritten out-of-order sign still taped to it. But someone had been there. Someone wearing a blue shirt, pretending to fix a machine that had been broken since they'd arrived. The envelope felt heavy in her purse, like it was gaining weight. Lara didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window with a kitchen knife she'd borrowed from the Comet, watching shadows move across the parking lot, jumping at every sound. At 3 a.m., her comm device buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept, lifting it slowly to her ear. Hello, Lara. The voice was male, familiar, sending ice down her spine. You really thought you could run, Gideon? How did I get this number? Baby, I've had this number all along. Did you really think changing your plan would help? His laugh was cruel. I let you run. Wanted to see how far you'd get. Turns out, not very far. Alara's grip tightened on the knife. Stay away from us. Or what? You'll call the authorities? We both know how that works out. His voice dropped, intimate and threatening. You're mine, Lara. You and Mia both. And tomorrow, I'm coming to remind you of that. The line went dead. Lara sat frozen, the comm device still pressed to her ear, her whole body shaking. He knew where she was. He'd known all along. This entire time, she'd been living in a trap, thinking she was free. She looked at the envelope on the nightstand. Start fresh. Don't look back. Someone else knew too. Someone was offering her a way out. A real way out, with new identities and new lives. But who? And what did they want in return? Lara didn't see the man in the sleek hover car across the parking lot, or the woman in the maintenance uniform who'd actually fixed the ice machine while installing a micro camera. She didn't see Arthur D'Angelo reviewing the footage on his tablet, or hear him call his cousin with an update. Boss, we've got a problem. Gideon just called her. He's making his move.